Thanks, Mateo, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. My name is Taghi. I am a PhD student at CERN, and my interests and my expertise is in machine learning, artificial intelligence, and now my project at CERN is focused on natural language processing for chatbots. Now, what I will do today is give you a brief overview of one of the tools named RASA that we will be using as part of the project for the Genial project. And I will tell you some of the functionalities, what are the cool things you can do with RASA, and how it can be customized for anyone's needs, basically. So this will be a very interactive presentation, as in I will be doing things on the screen, and so please stop me at any moment or ask questions whenever I go too fast or things are not clear. Yeah? Good? Okay. So, what RASA is? RASA is basically it's a framework that has a bunch of open source tools in order for people to make it simple to build their contextual AI chatbots. So using RASA and what RASA offers you, you can set up your domain, you can set up your different stories and everything else, and then build your chatbot based on that. What else makes RASA quite interesting is that you can easily integrate it into different channels. This can be Slack, this can be Messenger, this can be many different websites. As a tool, it's being used by quite large companies like BMW, Raiffeisen, UBS, and many others. The main high-level architecture behind is that once the RASA framework will receive a message, it will interpret it, it will update the memory and the state of the bot, it will look for the best next action, send a message to the user, and also update the state saying that I have done this action, so to keep track of everything else going on. Now, what I will start with is, let's say we have trained the model, which I have done already in our case. What we can do with the model is that, which is I think very common for the chatbots, no chatbot will be perfect. There will be mistakes, there will be problems. No bot can be trained to be perfect, even if you're using a very good AI techniques. What we can do with RASA is, we can create an interactive screen. With that, we can work on our bot, and once there are mistakes, we can update our bot. So, and the good thing is, what else we can do is we can actually see how our bot will change over time. So this is the basic bot that we have at the moment that you can see on the tree, on the visualization you have on your left. What the visualization represents are different possible stories and different possible paths that your bot could take within a conversation with the user. At this stage, it can only greet, ask for a name, remember the name, say thank you, say goodbye, and make a joke. All the jokes are about Chuck Norris because there's a website that can give you random jokes about Chuck Norris, but sure. We'll start with the very basic versions of everything. Right? So we'll have to focus on the bottom right of the screen at the moment. So we start with the bot, and the first message we have to start, let's say hello to our bot. And now, the way the interactive version works, it will tell you what the bot thinks it has to do next, as in with the intents and with basic action it has to take. What you have to keep in mind is that the things you see here, the greet, joke, thanks, goodbye, and the name, are different possible intents, so different possible actions the bot can take. It says if I see a string like hey, that basically means that it has to take the greet, it has to start greeting the person, greeting the user, which is the correct intent. So say, all right, this is correct. Let's go to the next step. As a next step, bot says, all right, if I am in the stage where I need to understand someone's name, I need to ask for the name as well. So it asks for the utter name, which is the bot's action to ask for a name. If we say yes here as well, we see that the bot sends a message that says, hey there, tell me your name. And then as a next stage, what's important to know that once there's a question asked, bot has to wait for a reply to come back. In this case, you see that the bot says, all right, should I run a listening action, which means it does nothing at the moment and waits for the user's input, which is also correct. If you say yes, and we see that at the same time that the graph is changing accordingly based on what action we are taking. So let's say that my name is Taghi. And then it will tell us, all right, I think you're sending us a name. Is this correct? Indeed. And then we see that the whole graph has reached around, and it will keep track of the name here as well. What's important is that there are things in RASA that are called slots, and what slot basically is a memory of the bot, meaning what information it has to take care of. And you can see all of this in a file called, in the domain of the bot. What domain does, it defines where your bot lives. This basically means what kind of actions it can take, what messages it should send, what information it has to keep track of. So you can see that there's a slot for the name, meaning there will be a text that represents your name, and it has to keep track of all of this. And then there are simple templates that make use of some information in order to reply to the user. And you can see that the name is actually used here in order to do that. And we can keep on going with this. And great. And it says, all right, nice to meet you. How can I help? Now, in our in the initial bot that we have said that the way the story or the talk will go through is there will be a greeting, there will be asking for a name, then the person will ask for a joke, and there will be a thanks and goodbye. Let's say that we skip all of it and just say goodbye and do nothing at all. Then you will see that there is a new branch spawned, that the new story spawned where the person just comes, says hello, tells their name, and then leaves without doing anything. What's good about in this case is that if we want to stop at any moment, we can actually export all and save all of these changes. Meaning we can save all this tree and all these new stories to our bot, and our bot can be trained upon on these new ones. So what is good with this interactive version is that, let's say we have built a model. We have created a model and then we have done something. What will be good then, if you give it to users or experts or give it to just a crowd to use our bot, we can also give them this interactive version instead of giving just a cold bot to talk to. And based on the mistakes, we can also actually train our model even better later on.
And how much time do you need to...
For the initial training?
The initial training in order to have something that you can put out of not on the market, but on the streets, I would say.
So
we're talking about a few days, we're talking about months, or...
So here's the thing. If you have a good understanding of like initial stories and initial domain where your bot has to live in, things can be done within half a day, couple hours, within RASA. We just have to define this couple files that describe what kind of things are possible. You can test it quickly, and then you can deploy it into wherever you want. Actually, like most of the things you see now, and the next thing I will show, these were all done yesterday night, for example. After work, quickly done for today's presentation, right? The actual training, if you want to use machine learning to train your models, that will depend on the machine learning models a lot. And what kind of data you have, and how large, let's say, your data set is. In that case, in the machine learning training, you can have easily 20 to 30 hours of training time. Actually, you can have even weeks of training time as well, depending on how complex you go and how harsh you are on your accuracy statements and many other things. Sorry, yes?
But you can partially deploy in the sense that at some point you
Indeed.
say,
so
leave it to a human.
That's what I mean by like how harsh you are on your accuracy statements and such. If you want to go really harsh on it and say it has to be really good and as good as it can get, yes, then you will need a lot of time because the last bits will take a lot of time. However, if you say that, you know, 4 out of 6 cases is good enough for us to be correct, because we will then have this interactive case that will reteach our model, then yes, you can do things within half a day again or so.
Okay, so we're just talking about a few hours, minutes.
Once you know what you want to do, yes. The problem with the machine learning part, let's say, is usually defining the model. Because there is no easy ways to go about it, and there are no actual good bots around, that basically means that if you want to do it correct, there will be some solutions available that will do well enough or are known to do well. However, if you look at it from a research perspective, this can take you years to get to a good model, a good enough model, let's say. However, as I said, if you have enough information and base, you can do things within a couple of days, within a week or so.
So the better you define your perimeter,
And if it's small enough, then it will go quickly.
Indeed. If you have
If
very
you try to get something broad that will answer all the questions about the city,
exactly.
then you're lost.
Yes.
So those are the two extremes basically. So if you have one very well-defined task, yes, you can make your bots very quickly because you know you have limitations, right? And you say anything out, you just say I don't understand you.
But you can say I don't understand you, but let me try to find out what it is about.
Of course, you can make your bot as custom as you want, and you can say send an email to this person, or this is what I see quickly, and stuff like that.
It will show in a second the actions, and actions are really powerful because what you can do is when you arrive at specific spots, then you can maybe say, okay, I've understood you need this type of information, so you can create an action that corresponds to that question. That can be another bot, that can be go to a web page, that can be call this number.
Yeah,
exactly.
It can be anything you want basically.
And it can be very
as we're
complex.
talking about the idea behind it, for example, the joke telling in this example, let's say, or whatever else it is, you don't want it to be very unique. Let's say you don't want it to be always the same thing. You want it to have some kind of interaction, some kind of a novelty in it. So, for example, what you can do with your the actions within RASA is that you can do whatever you want in Python. Whatever you can do in Python as a language, you can do it in your actions, and then use that as well or as deep or as much as you want in your chatbot. And the idea, for example, here is that it will send a request to a website, to an API to get an information, and then use that information to give you a result, right? If you have like a, let's say a bot that looks into buying tickets, for example, for a concert or something like that, right? It can send a request to a website that tries to get all the concerts in the area, parses the information, and gives you the relevant information, let's say, right? And all of it can be done within this actions idea. So you can easily do whatever you want with this, basically. And this is the good part because even though RASA from the initial look looks very limiting in a sense, because you have this, ways you have to follow with stories and domains and everything else, you can have a very generic abstract bot that just asks for a couple common information that's required, and then within actions and within this the custom pipelines that you develop, it can then change the behavior based on that, and then find or act accordingly, let's say.
So that means that even if in the beginning you've got a small perimeter, garbage
yes,
removal in your street, but you can increment it month after month. You say, okay, last month it was the garbage.
Yeah.
Tomorrow is going to be flowers,
yes.
and you always stay within the same system, but you just increase your perimeter
very easily. Yeah.
Very easily, and at the pace that you think is reasonable.
Basically, yeah.
So it's quite responsive.
Yes,
yeah.
So it's not static. It's dynamic. The whole environment, in the sense that it gives you a very good ground, but what you do with that ground is up to you, and how much you expand it is up to you as well. So it just gives you a very powerful framework to do things, and then you can easily put everything into GUIs, and then have your bot basically
Tell you a joke.
or just run online basically.
Oh yeah.
Let's see if this works. And the whole thing that took to put it online, for example, is also 3 lines of scripting, basically, just to know that there's this connection that has to happen, this is where you will be hosting everything, and then you can have this basic interface that hosts your chatbot. Okay, I don't know if this will work, but let's try. Okay, there's a joke about check notes. Usually they're not funny, but that's the point, I think. Exactly. didn't make sense. There's also some writing errors as well sometimes. But for example, the joke pod is an action, and each time you will ask it to tell a joke, it will go fetch a different joke. It should go fetch a different joke. Okay, it's still trying to. The internet connection, I think, is a problem. But basically, what we wanted to show basically with this RASA is the idea is that with this we can start very basic. Okay, there's actually a joke. Sure. All right. The idea was that we can start with RASA, we can start basic, we can start simple. But the fact that this can be done in a very interactive way, the fact that this can be expanded over time, you can expand the applications and you can then use it in many different places that are common for people, for workplaces, for users to be in, like Messenger chats or Slack channels or anything else. And then consider that within half an hour you can create this simple UI that will host your interface, your chatbot in it. Makes the RASA as a very good framework and very good base to start the project upon. So one thing to add is that my research is on the NLP and the chatbot itself, like for the information retrieval and question answering. So we are progressing there, and the idea will be that in the future, at some point, to use what advancements we have there in the research, try to see if we can use them in a framework like this, and then combine machine learning and users' input and users' basic feedback into one complete chatbot, let's call it. So this will be more or less quick introduction from me. Please, questions, feedback, or anything, please do tell me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Taghi.
Can you say a bit more about the integrations?
Integrations? Yes, so the basic idea behind is that as long as you have authentication tokens that you can generate for your bots, you can give those tokens to the bot in a single file, basically, which is how to define the token and where the request should be sent, and then it will integrate itself through that. Like there's an explanation of it how it's done here, but I haven't gone into the integration. I haven't tried the integration with Slack, for example. But if the endpoint works, yeah. There's a quick description of how you can integrate within the Slack. Okay. But it's very similar the way that, for example, you can put your GitHub, your Travis, your other bots into, so you can integrate them into Slack as well to give you updates or messages. It's a very similar idea. Just as long as you have the authentication token in place, there's no problem. The communication is taken care of. The communication is taken care of by the RASA itself, from the RASA core itself.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I was wondering, start feed the bot. But for example, if you have an FAQ, which is already a file, an Excel Word file, how do you take that information and feed it into there? Do you have to really cut all what you have into the intent and?
Yes.
And
there are two ways to go at it. One way is to keep the intent and saying that there's a question coming in, and then have an action take care of the question. So you have a separate model that just answers the question, right? So you don't have to do it within RASA. In the sense that you can just have an action that says answer the question. Takes the question as a query, as a string, finds the answer within your FAQ, and then returns it as a message to the user. Or says that this is the link where you can find more information about it. So from the RASA perspective, your intent and domain can be at the level of greeting and like identification of that there's a question coming in, basically. And then in the question, you can make it generic, saying that there's questions can be what is or how to, and whatever starts with that, you just say it's a question. And you can have a separate machine learning model implemented as an action that takes care of the question and then gives you the answer as well as it can. So you don't have to do it within RASA directly. You can do it within actions and within Python, basically.
okay, so that's an easy way to do it.
That's an easy workaround, yeah. If you want to do it very specific to your FAQ and don't rely on any kind of machine learning models or anything like that, yes, then you will have to define everything within your domain and intents and everything else, but that's a lot of manual work, so that won't give you much, to be honest, as a benefit in my mind, than just telling the people to go check the website for FAQ.
Mm.
And you've done it in English, and of course,
So
many languages that are supported, I suppose.
there are a lot of languages supported because the backend basically uses this thing called spacing. That's a famous TensorFlow library that just has a lot of languages in it for parsing and embedding the given strings. And French is one of the options as well. As far as I know, it has issues sometimes because, I mean, most languages are not as common as English, let's say, when it comes to information. However, it's a possibility. And it is working well enough.
But it doesn't translate.
It's not a translation, it's like you can tell that the input will be given in French, so it expects a French text. And then it will use the French language database for processing the strings.
Okay, so it's not going to translate my FAQ.
No,
No.
that's
No.
not the idea, no.
Okay. You
So,
have to feed it in English and in French, so
yeah.
if you want to give the option of
If you want to give the option, you will have
you
to.
have to do it upstream.
You can do translation, but probably with the translation you will lose so much accuracy that it's probably better just to have, option to go either English or French as a branch, because machine translation, as well as it's getting, it's not still at the level to be human-like or anything like that. It's quite far.
You tried to use DeepL as a translator?
I don't remember which one it was, but I've used a couple translation techniques within like deep neural networks and such for different reasons. There I didn't care about how accurate they were because as long as they did something it was fine. But from what I remember, like 70-75% is the highest accuracy they will get in the machine translation.
I don't remember.
Because I think there's special data sets that are quite complex, and on those they do the training. I think on a daily basis, French to English translation will be more than okay.
Well, check in case there's a translator on the web called DeepL, and the quality is just incredible.
I mean, there is like recently there are quite some good translators. It's just.
And who's behind DeepL? You know?
There was one that was
it's
good
a
by
European.
Google.
It's German. It's German. I mean,
Okay.
you can really take a text, translate it, and then publish it, and you're not ashamed of the quality. If you have a website and you want to put some things in Italian or in French or in German, I don't know if you confirm.
True. Yeah, this is probably the best actually.
Yeah, it is according to the test they do.
Yeah.
That was DeepL.
This one.
Okay. Any more questions?
Yes, I have one. Is there a solution to offer choices?
Yes, you can have so the way you can do it with slots basically, and that is you can have buttons, let's say, and what you can just have actions or intents that says when the button is clicked, you change the value of a slot, so a variable in memory, to a specific value that's relevant to the button that has been pressed. You can do it through the buttons basically. It's within the same way the images are within the language available for RASA. There's also buttons that does do the same thing basically.